Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust. We are so happy that you chose to spend some time with us as we talk about issues relevant to our personal and community health. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Thank you, Dr. Barbara Davis Stevens. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the heat. It's reasonably cool here. Uh, Good morning, Dr. Walks. What road did you sit on today?
I sat in the third row today, Dr. Maxey.
Okay, that's good. Just want to make sure you prayed for me a little
I was there, Dr. Maxey.
bit. Okay. So we want to talk about, we had a recent national holiday, which is being denigrated by your president. But I would like to just review what that celebration was supposed to be about and put it in a context. I prepared some slides for discussion. I want Simon to put them up, and I want our moderators to comment as we go through it. It's not a lecture, but just some slides that have some ideas, and each of them has a copy. And I will start out, and it's something that says including legal and political strategies to defend DEI and democracy. But I want to start off, we already know that we have some different opinions on definitions and what is what. And I want our co-moderators to be able to see and say things as they see them, not necessarily what my outline says. So let's start off. Juneteenth, what it really reveals today. Let's go to the next slide. So we'll start off where we ended up last week with the transatlantic slave journey. And we know that the average time that it took to come across the ocean, which was 4,000 to 5,000 miles, was 6 to 12 weeks from West Africa to what's now known as the United States. And we know that there were hundreds of enslaved people per ship. I don't know the size of the ship, but they're chained, they're crammed in the bottom, they're malnourished, they were tortured, they were beaten. And the mortality rate was up to 20% or more from disease, starvation, and trauma. One of the traumas that I found out was in my area of renal failure. When you beat somebody, especially several times, there's something called rhabdomyolysis, which is a breakdown of protein. You get a protein called myoglobin in the blood, and that is toxic to the kidney. So many of these people had kidney failure. And if you have one beating, you have so much, 3 beatings, 4 beatings, you can actually die from that. Let's go to the next slide. So the diet during and after the Middle Passage. Maybe Dr. Neighbor Stevens, you're the cook in the family here. Just discuss the slide if you would.
Sure. So the Middle Passage diet consisted of minimal amounts of beans, rice, maize, and dirty water. After arrival, pork fat, cornmeal, molasses was frequently the diet, which was quite nutrient deficient. And the impact of all of this was stunted growth, chronic illness, and epigenetic effects.
And we can define epigenetic effects as things that can be generational, passed down, but not necessarily involving directly the DNA. Let's go to the next slide. Dr. Walsh, will you take this one?
I can. I want to apologize for my camera not doing what I wanted to do today. Modern rollbacks and attacks, DEI and Black progress. Removal of DEI offices in education and government. defunding Medicaid and food assistance and vaccines, Confederate names restored to military bases. These are all examples of modern rollbacks and current attacks.
And I think they took Jackie Robinson down. They wanted the NIAM service. Uh, so let's go to the next slide. So what about this says? It says signals second class citizenship. So are we really seen as normal citizens in this country? It aims to erase progress and suppress resistance, and it maintains structural inequity. In other words, this is on purpose. It's not something that started with our current administration. It was there in Biden, it was there in Obama, Bush, and Clinton, everybody else. This is not just the Republicans. Understand that. This is U.S. policy. In fact, we know that years ago, before the Nazis came into power, where they got eugenics from, where they got the ideas about how to have a society where there was a master race, and they got it from the United States, especially during the time of Woodrow Wilson, etc. Next slide. So it's just the three of us, right?
Dr. Lawson is also with us.
Hello, Dr. Lawson. How are you? Is he unmuted?
Let me look, make sure he didn't fall off. Nope, he's still with us, but he's muted.
Would you take this one, Dr. Neighbor?
Anti-Semitism versus anti-Black racism. Government response to disparity. Anti-Semitism met with swift condemnation and funding. Anti-Black racism, often ignored or politicized, reveals bias in public and policy responses.
Okay. So what does this somewhat say? Why is anti-Semitism met so swiftly and anti-Black racism is ignored? You want to comment on that, being from the South?
Well, my comment actually goes back to something that was on one of the earlier slides when you were talking about second-class citizens. You make an assumption that we're even considered human. And so, since that has not necessarily been adopted or accepted by all residents of this country, one can then expect, not just understand, but expect to meet with racism, inequality, and all of the forms and fashions that we experience in this country.
The other thing that I would point out here that even though it's been denied, but if we look at the people who own and have major control of our media fit into the group that is most affected by what they call anti-Semitism. So our whole communications area is somewhat slanted, and we've heard all week long about how Israel is under attack, but we don't talk about the attacks going on in the Congo and other places around the world. Let's go to the next slide. So Dr. Walks to keep me from getting in too much trouble, right?
I'm gonna try, Dr. Maxey.
Okay.
Call to action, how we should respond. I think that there's a lot to be said in this slide. So let me go through. The first bullet is support Black-led institutions and civic organizations. invest in education, ownership, and self-determination, organize for policy, budget, and ballot-based action.
That
And if I
means
could
voting.
make, I'm sorry, Dr. Maxey?
That means voting, right?
Well, it means many things, including voting. And I think that very often we we can do more to clarify that yes, there are some large policy issues that impact our community. Clearly, the data, you don't need to have an opinion about it. The data documents that there are inequities in health, in food, in all kinds of ways that we measure whether people are treated equally. At the same time, none of the progress that African Americans have made in America and in other countries was made by African Americans alone. There are people who who voted for equal rights in America that weren't black. There are people who stand up and call out racism when they see it who are not black. And I think that we have to always recognize that this is not our battle alone. It's a battle that others fight with us, but it helps them too. It helps the people who fight with us are helped by having increasing equity in our country. So yeah, there are people who don't think we're human. There are people who don't think that we matter at all. But that's not every member of any one group. So I won't tell you about the drunk black Republican that I spent way too long talking with yesterday, who was trying to convince me that everything is fine. So
Mm.
so,
Mm.
so my wife said, "Why do you always talk to drunk people? It's
What
a
was
waste of time."
what was he high on?
He was drunk and he had money, and a lot of times we get very selfish about how the world is working when we're not immediately in danger, and that's a problem. So anyway, I digress. So Dr. Maxey, when we talk about organizing, we and I said this earlier this week in another forum, we have a lot of folks that have said in the past that we need to organize, from Dr. King to people before Dr. King to people after Dr. King, have talked to us about coming together as a community. And what is your, when you say how we should respond, and this is on a slide, what are your thoughts, Dr. Maxey, about specifically what we should do?
What my thoughts are, Dr. Walks, is that our response should initially be local. I think when people politically start from the top and go top down, let's get a new president elected, let's get a new Congress elected. I think first you got to do the basic work, like in your ward or in your block with your family. And it is actually all these decisions are made at the local level, the city council level, the level of the what do they call those things, county level, and we should go that way. And we should have a multi-pronged approach. But first, you have to have the little things done because they support the big things. Education is very important, how we teach our kids. And we need to teach our kids that we've been telling people our kids need to grow up and get a job. No, they need to grow up and own something and have your own job and have employees. You have no thing to say if you work for somebody. We need to teach our kids to own property and be self-sufficient. So those are my thoughts on this. Let's go to the next slide.
Dr. Lawson has his hand up.
Dr. Lawson, hello, sir.
Hello, I think I'm unmuted now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, just want to go back a little bit, and this will probably be another whole show of itself. As you may know, I'm working on a book now that's simply is what the slave masters taught us, and it essentially supports exactly what you're saying. But none of these, the question that I have is, we know what needs to be done. Why isn't it being done? And I'm convinced that it has to do with many of the things that you said that be beyond slavery. And I just want to add to that the mental health, mental issues. One is the thought that we should not use our brains, that we should use our bodies. The other is that during the such that our mental lives were ignored during the Middle Passage. The suicide was a major factor during the Middle Passage, but not well documented. And yet, there's good evidence that it was a major issue that had to be dealt with. That once we got here, that intellectual thought was considered irrelevant. The idea that anything that had to be done had to be come from the slave master. And so we still have this idea that our problems are going to be solved by legislation in the central government and so forth. And that we still have, in many community organizations, the resistance to going from doing anything local to doing something like if we vote right or if we had put black politicians in power, that our problems are going to be solved. In fact, there has to be a change in our mindset. The idea that we cannot be self-sufficient. The idea that we cannot have our own resources. The idea that we should not work towards gaining our own resources. All of these are deeply held beliefs in our community that are often not acknowledged. And unless they are acknowledged, the very things that you want to see happen simply won't happen. People will come up with a million excuses of what's going on and why they're important. And it also fits in with the difference between anti-Semitism versus racism. Uh, Jews are taught, let's not forget, they have presented the narrative that they've been victimized. African Americans, the narrative have been presented that we are victimizing everybody else. And again, it's how we think about these issues rather than doing specific steps. The steps don't happen unless we look at ourselves in terms of the directions that we want to go.
That made me think of two things. So the Japanese have something called Kumon School, and all these little Asian children, after they go to public school or private school, starting at 4 o'clock, they go to Kumon School, and
We call
then
it Buddhist schools in our area.
they learn about math and science and also culture. And I think we need to have something similar. The other thing I was saying, in line with what you're saying, uh, they have told us we're not quite animals. We don't necessarily get shot in the head if we break a leg. So we're a little bit better than the thoroughbred horse. Next slide. I'm sorry, Dr. Walks.
I'm doing my best to keep you out of trouble, Dr. Maxey, but tough job.
Dr. Neighborship, will you take this one?
Strategic litigation, tactics that work. Class actions for wrongful firings and policy harm, civil rights lawsuits by the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and American Civil Liberties Union, use of amicus briefs in high-impact court cases.
Okay. Any comments on that one, Doctor?
I,
Well,
I,
I just want to say that I think all of these are useful tools. Some of them are less accessible to many of us than others, but where we can do it, we absolutely should use all the tactics we can because it is a long-term battle that will require all kinds of tactics.
Thank you. Next slide.
I think Dr. Lawson raised his hand again.
Go ahead, Dr. Lawson.
Well, I just want to say that's all very nice. Again, I go back to my main point, and that is that again, too many of our folks have been taught to believe not to take action. We did a survey in DC, and I was shocked to find that the people who had the fewest complaints in terms of police misbehavior and so forth were African Americans. It wasn't that black folks somehow felt oppressed or couldn't express themselves. They chose not to. They were taught well that you don't do such things. So the opportunity, especially in the district, for folks to complain was very much there. For involved similar same thing in terms of NAACP and other organizations. What we find is that many times the organizations themselves either fall apart or have
I think you were
difficulty.
cut off. Are you back muted again?
No,
No, mine's working.
yeah, we can hear him.
Yeah, was the same point, and that is they had difficulty convincing folks to step forth and to take action. Some was very clear. I mean, you get shot, you get lynched, and so forth. But many times, I give the example of the San Diego Zoo. They don't need to put the animals in cages. And what's happened in terms of the impact of the long-term impact of slavery is you don't need the bars anymore. Too many folks have learned not to do anything in terms of take advantage of the kinds of institutions that can probably do something.
And so go along to get along, right?
Exactly.
Okay, would you take this slide, Dr. Lawson?
And it's a this is federal tools how to fight back.
Yes.
Yeah, EEOC, DOJ support inclusive programs under law, oversight hearings, review targeted rollbacks, congressional caucus can propose new protections. I think those are all wonderful, effective, but again, it requires that there's strong community support as well as community knowledge. What I find is that many people simply do not have the knowledge or awareness of the kinds of programs that exist. They often, when we talk about oversight hearing, you got to have Congress people there who's going to propose the hearings. And if you don't vote them in, it won't happen. And in many instances, one of the interesting findings I found, especially in the South, is that many Congress people live in safe districts. And because they live in safe districts, oftentimes you end up with folks in communities, which black folks had the same people over and over and over again, but who don't have power because they don't influence the vast majority of congressmen. And then we can say congressional caucuses can propose new protections. Again, it's working under this old slavery idea that you got to go up and look at the great white central leader to take care of things. Congressional caucuses work only if you have strong community support, you have people voting in, and they themselves find that the system is not simply for them to stay in power, but also to make changes that may upset the apple cart.
So would you and everybody else weigh in on the current Congressional Black Caucus, which has a meeting? They come up in September, October, don't they?
Right.
And how can they help us? And what do you think of them? I'd like everybody's opinion of that.
Well, I found that I was on the Veterans Task Force and found them very helpful. Our issue was simply very simple, and that is we found that in the VA system that African American veterans were less likely to get benefits, even though they were more likely to be in the front line, more likely to get PTSD, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, found out I had to educate our congressmen to even be aware of this because many of them just didn't know. And I found that once we did this was a forum that was very useful in getting the Congress people together and and be helpful to address it. On the other hand, you had to time it right because if it was elections coming up, mostly you got the aides, you didn't get the congressmen themselves, and so your message sometimes got lost. So the Congressional Black Caucus can be very effective, but it is incredibly ineffective when most of them tend to be Democrats, and the Democrats are power, so they don't do very well. And two, that often don't seem to be that effective in terms of local elections as much as they could be.
What about you, Dr. Neighbor Stevens, Dr. Walks?
Well, um, I don't have a real line of sight on them. I mean, I don't have contact with them personally, and they're not in the news very often. So I don't really have much of a line of sight on them.
What about you, Dr. Walks?
So, um, being in Washington D.C., there is some level of proximity to a lot of the policymakers, and where I think a lot of folks are stuck right now is in a state of frustration because they they are not able to be heard um, politically from a policy perspective. They don't have the votes. They can't. They can't. And it sounds like they're complaining all the time. They don't get the news coverage. There are a lot of issues that we have to continue to support each other in pushing forward. And one of the things that Dr. Lawson mentioned a little bit ago, I want to say, yes, it is true. Obviously, Dr. Lawson said it, so it's true that folks do not complain about things. Um, Sometimes you get tired of complaining when you realize that things are not going to change, that they're not going to take your complaints seriously, and so when we continue to say to folks, well, you guys aren't complaining like everybody else is complaining, well, we can see that our complaints don't get the same results that everybody else's complaints get. And so we need to continue to encourage each other and support each other when we do have a complaint, and maybe um, have us utilize things like, especially in Washington, D.C., there are these neighborhood commissioners that are built into the system that folks can talk to. You don't have to go right to the police chief or right to the mayor. And maybe there needs to be more activity, as Dr. Maxey said earlier, about getting things done at the very, very local level, the level of a couple of houses or a couple of blocks. Because if people feel like someone is hearing them and that their complaint is going somewhere, maybe they will complain more often. And then we can help those complaints be organized so that they can be translated to the other people who are making policies and who are trying to manage things. So this is not simple at all, but I think it's doable if we don't put each other down for what we're not doing, and at the same time encourage each other to do things in a way that can make a difference. So we can see that you're not complaining in vain.
One of the things that Dr. Lawson said, I'm a bit appalled by, but I believe it's true, that the congressmen themselves had no knowledge of what was going on in the VA. They need to spend more time being knowledgeable of what's going on. I know we need to take our complaints to them, but they need to have some level of scholarship to make an effort to know what's going on, don't you think?
Don't I think? I think that if we want somebody to know something, we have to tell them. And I think that expecting them to come and find out what's going on would be nice, but we don't have to wait for that.
No, that's
Like,
true. That's true.
we can organize at the block level, at the neighborhood level, and and reach out to a congressman's office and say, hey, I'd like to host a fundraiser for you when you run for reelection. And you can do that at somebody's house. I've hosted fundraisers at my house, at my office, for congressional candidates, for people running for governor. We need to make sure that people know that we want to support them, and then we expect them to listen to us and to support us.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. So now, this may be controversial. Protect DEI. Now, DEI supposedly means diversity, equity, and inclusion. But this says that this country was founded on it being diverse, which it was not. Founded upon everybody being equal, which it was not. And definitely not being included, inviting you to their party or their house for dinner. I think Sidney Poitier won the Oscar for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner Tonight or something like that.
Yep.
So that's an issue that some of us rightly take issue with. Uh, but we do know that we need to pass state laws to include education and training because we know without education, that doesn't necessarily mean reading, writing, and arithmetic. It means being educated about what is affecting your life as well. Situational awareness, like you never go into a neighborhood at night without looking around, knowing what's likely to hit you in the head. There are also executive orders and municipal DI officers. So the same way that we have federal DI, there's local DI that we ought to be dealing with. And we also ought to be able to use referendums to embed protection in state law. Again, this is taking things to the local level. But I'd like our panel and any of our audience to comment on the word DEI. Every time I see that word, I think of DUI, but it's DEI. Any comments on does our country really ever been founded on DEI or that idea?
If I may, I was raised in a segregated school system, so I learned was exposed very quickly to why we need something like DEI, because my school was set up as a system where many of the basic sciences simply were not available for our school. Why why was that? Because the powers that be felt that we didn't need we didn't need to know basic science. We're, and based on the assumption that because of our limited cognitive capacity, we would never appreciate it anyhow. So as a result, down the train, you find that many of us have great difficulty in doing things like going into the sciences and professions and other fields. So DEI for me has been the long-term fight in terms of making sure that we have African American physicians and other diverse populations in the fields. Plus, I've also been struggling for a long time in terms of dealing with the fact that our science is based on an underrepresentation of people of color. I frequently go to professional meetings where we simply aren't there. And it shows up in the research. My own research in terms of ethnic psychopharmacology, showing that the data simply isn't there in terms of trying to look at some basic factors in terms of how medications affect different folks. DEI needs, we used to have the directory of medications. What we find is that the dosing levels, the appropriate effects in terms of side effect profiles of medications were just wrong simply because the investigators and researchers, we were not included both in terms of the subjects or in terms of investigators. So I think one of the dangers of ignoring DEI is the impact it will have in terms of long-term scientific and health benefits for African Americans.
I'm thinking, I know I'm not supposed to ask people from Tennessee to comment, but I am.
I really don't have too much to say about this. I think that we can spend all day talking about how we are discriminated against, how we are uh, things are not equal for us, and how we are not included. But I don't think DEI is particularly helpful in achieving the goals that I think we all want in terms of moving ourselves ahead.
What would your idea be?
I'm sorry, what would the what be?
What would you propose instead of DEI?
I think that DEI is way too passive. I think we need to take on a really looking at the way things were framed during the civil rights era, not everything, but looking at how it was framed. For example, Brown versus the board is helpful, what possibly is um, and I was certainly not around and did not hear them talk about their legal strategy. But what we really wanted was equal, and we didn't get it with desegregation. And so we need to go back and demand the things that we really see have not happened. So equal, um, not integration necessarily, and certainly not desegregation, but
You,
equal access,
you know
equal access.
what you just reminded me of
What?
when you said, first of all, I think the difference that you say is we should not be asking for those things, but demanding those things. And I wanted you just to spend a minute explaining the implication of your part of your last name. I think people need to know that the neighbor part.
Yeah, I know what part you're talking about. I'm trying to figure out what it is that you want me to say about it. Other than I can tell you that I come from a family that has been fighting for equality for a long time.
And who was his number one partner working with?
Thurgood Marshall.
All right. Dr. Wells, what are your thoughts on DEI?
So, so Dr. Maxey, I have a I have a lot of thoughts, and as we're getting close to the top of the hour, let me see if I can be relatively brief. You know, we try to we try to say things that weren't written for us or about us or with us even thought about. When we say that, the Constitution says this, the Declaration of Independence says that, yes, they did come to America initially, those people, for diversity, for religious diversity. We want to act like if diversity always has to do something about race, ethnicity, and culture. It really doesn't. That's not the definition of that word in the dictionary. And I think that we have to do for us. I'm with Dr. Neighbor Stevens and anybody else who I yesterday I was trying to discuss with someone who looked like me about why we're not treated fairly. I'm like, come on. Do we treat each other fairly? No, we don't. There's something about having to really understand. Okay, let me just give one example. I'm gonna shut up because I really can just go completely off. And Dr. Lawson knows me, and he'll just sit there and be entertained by me going off. But one example, when I was working in Los Angeles County, we had an outbreak of treatment-resistant tuberculosis. Very, very difficult thing to deal with. That's why it's called treatment resistant, right? And we're trying to get people engaged across the county that this is a problem. And they're saying to me, well, this is a Dr. Walks, we know, but this is really harming the Hispanic community in East LA. And we understand that, but we don't have that problem here. And it wasn't until I explained to them, seemed like it was obvious to me, that the people riding the buses and coming to clean their houses in Bel Air were the people who were sick in East LA. And suddenly it was different because now it impacted them. And I
Mhm.
think that we have to get the people who are impacted, which is us, to stop looking at the rest of us as being less than, because we do. We look at the rest of us as being less than. We won't take time to understand what different challenges we may have. And I think we got to do this ourselves. We have to be willing to get out in our communities and let people know that they matter to us, and let people know that we want to do something that is that is going to be useful for them, that they can feel is going to be useful. You know how many Black folks in many different communities think that everything is hopeless? There's a lot of them who think that that whatever health disparities we talk about, that's just the way it is. It's just going to be that way. And if God wanted us to be healthier, God would make us healthier. And by the way, it's a blessing that we're struggling, because it means that God is going to take us to someplace better, because we're supposed to live through the struggle. Come on. I
Yeah,
have a I'm okay with God being in the middle of everything, and I do believe that God allows everything, but I don't think God wants any of us to be in positions of being less than. So we need to get out in our communities, and we need to let people know that, hey, my name is Ivan Walks and I care about what's happening here, and I think I can help. Now you tell me what best way you think I can help, but I do think I can help. Let me just start with that. That's what
okay.
I got.
Let's go. I think we got about 2 more slides. Next slide. So coalitions and public pressure, unions, civil rights groups that lead public resistance. I just read something that they're getting ready to do a boycott against McDonald's. Good luck. Boycotts, campaign pressure, and corporations to comply, and media coverage and storytelling help shape the narrative. I just read that somebody said they go to uh, Lowe's all the time. And that's because Lowe's has a black CEO. So that's good to know. Anybody want to comment on this slide before we go to the next one?
I just want to make the comment that um, I think watching what happened around the last election, and also watching what happened with the Anti-King Day and other public displays of displeasure and resistance, that we need to also include in there, not that anybody's age should preclude them from doing anything, but I think we need to recognize and support the enthusiasm that I think I'm seeing in the younger generation with their intolerance of the current condition. Now, they may or may not know which direction they want to go, how to get there, but they are definitely of the mindset that this can't continue. And I hope that that is what's happening. I hope it grows, because without that, we won't make any progress.
I think that's very important. We're another,
Amen.
we're another slide, Simon. Okay, Dr. Lawson, will you do this one?
To frame DEI as inclusive excellence, not quotas. Again, I think of DEI more broadly. It's not just diverse and equality and so forth, inclusiveness as inclusive excellence. Uh, the idea of the fear of DEI is that it's going to dumb down people, that we're going to have unqualified people. When in fact, the anti-DEI movement, I'm convinced, has been used to protect incompetent people. That with the pre-DEI, we had unqualified white people making decisions, and I think we still have that. You structured hiring, training, audits for fairness. Again, it's not just for fairness, but for knowledge. The person can be fair as all day, but the person is ignorant in terms of the importance of diversity, you're not going to get anywhere. Tailor practices for legal defensibility. I think that's an excellent point. The problem is when you run into science and you run into folks that simply do not know what the literature shows in terms of the importance of diversity and in terms of its impact in terms of healthcare and availability and absence of services. Again, my own research and others have shown that ethnic matching, for instance, produces better outcomes than when you don't have it. Legally, you could say, well, ethnic matching is working against equality. You got to have anybody to come in and provide services, when in fact that's not true.
Okay, let's get to the next slide. I'm trying to get to the end of the deck. Go to the next slide, Simon. That's it.
Have enough. That's right.
Okay. All right. Any comments in the chat or anybody have their hands raised?
Not yet, not so far.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, right? I know Dr. Walks was saying we're going to get there real quick. Uh, but we're there. So I'd like to go around the horn if nobody has a comment, or let's go around the horn, starting with Dr. Lawson, then Dr. Walsh, that's Neighbor Stevens, and for today's ending comments on our talk.
I think that this dialogue was very important. And again, make another pitch in terms of my book, but also other people who have similar thoughts. And that is, we know what we need to do. Why aren't we doing it? I think that Dr. Max suggested that it had the roots are in slavery, that much of the disparities that we have are a result of some of the practices that it began, developed in slavery. My contention is that the practice that it had was the mindset that developed, that emerged from slavery has not been challenged and unfortunately has become institutionalized in our country. It's not just institutionalized racism, but institutionalized thinking in a way that's oppressive and is not in our interests.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lawson. Dr. Ivan Walks.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Maxey, for the opportunity to comment on this. I think that one of the things that we could have spent a little bit more time on, and maybe Dr. Lawson and I will come back and do and lead another conversation on it, is really the impact on all the things we've talked about today on the the mental health and the energy of a lot of folks in our community. A lot of folks are say, "Well, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Well, people are tired, and they, in many cases, are giving up. And this is not a time to give up. It's really a time to focus and move forward. And Dr. Lawson's comments about what we can do to move forward in our community and why are we doing it? It's important. But it's a question we can answer. I think we're all scientists. We can get together and figure out why aren't we doing it, and then we can put something in place to help us move in a direction that can uplift the community. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Dr. Walks. That's Neighbor Stevens.
So I love the idea of continuing the conversation that you were describing, Dr. Walks. But I would ask that you, very knowledgeable people, think about also the impact of this current behavior, current and past behavior, the impact it has as role modeling for the newer generations. I'm sorry, I'm the pediatrician, and I believe that our children and our youth and our young people are going to be the ones that are going to have to carry this forward. Um, but I'm very concerned about the role model that we are presenting to them. Uh, it is certainly perpetuating what you were talking about before, but also it'll be key to the intervention to make the change. So,
Mhm.
what I have to say.
So,
Amen.
Neighbor Stevens. So, the one thing that I said during our current administration's first attempt at office, and we'll say it even now, the good thing, it will teach us what the truth really is. And until we really know what the truth really is of where we are meant to fit into society, can we make it what we want? So it's really showing people the truth. There's no lie in what they're trying to show us. What the real purpose of us is supposed to be in this society. We don't have to accept it, but many people don't believe it. They don't believe it. But if you see the claws on the hands of a lion, you better believe that they can kick your butt. So I think that we need to continue this discussion in future weeks, not only on DEI, but on everything that affects our community's mental health, physical health, spiritual health. I think we need to do that. I think this year's Congressional Black Caucus should be massive. I think we should take part in it, and we should definitely make sure that Hakeem Jeffries and his crew of people know how to do the best things for us they can. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Simon, for helping out, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye,
Good day,
everyone.
everyone.
Goodbye. Yeah.
Bye bye.